Welcome to the Unlocked Podcast, a podcast where we decode human performance one gene at a time. I'm Tony, and this series isn't just about science. It's about unlocking the hidden power you carry in your biology, so you can train smarter, live longer, and activate what most people think is fixed. We're going to talk about genes, healing, mental clarity, recovery, and even where science and soul start to meet. But we're starting with the foundation. Because most people don't know what DNA really is, or how much control they actually have. A lot of people get sold the idea that more supplements automatically means more results. And you can see how that happens. You hear vitamin D, then magnesium, then omega-3, then creatine, then electrolytes, then a sleep stack, then something for stress, and now you got a routine that looks serious but is crazy fuzzy. So today is built around two words: synergistic and antagonistic. Synergistic means combinations that support each other's absorption or function, and antagonistic means combinations that compete, block absorption, or reduce effect. A simple way to remember it is two things that work better together, so the combo gives you more than either one would give you on its own. That would be synergistic. And two things that get each other's way, so the combo, or get in each other's way, so the combo gives you less than you expected, even though you're taking more of it, would be antagonistic. If you don't really follow me, please drop a comment and ask for me to clear things up. I don't want to have any mistakes. I want you guys to always be able to understand completely. That being defined, this is going to help us stay clear for the entire episode. Before we even talk about what pairs well and what competes, I want to put one thing in the right place so you get a baseline. Speaking of baseline, your blood work is going to be that baseline. Not because everyone needs to obsess over labs, and not because you need a test for every capsule, but because a basic panel tells you what direction you're actually starting from. I can't tell you how many people are taking supplements. I've had someone relatively recent who, have gone through some things, and I was like, get your blood work done. And if you can relate to taking a lot of supplements, comment, DM me, ask me what you should do next. I will 100% help. So again, before taking supplements, blood work should come first. Without testing, supplementation is mostly guesswork. A person may think that they're low in something or be told to try a vitamin, but without labs, there's no way to know what is actually deficient, what is borderline, and whether the issue is deeper than intake alone. And truth be told, there's not usually one single test called a vitamin deficiency test. In most cases, it's a group of labs. In practice, common starting labs include a CBC, a CMP, iron studies, B12, folate, and 25-hydroxy vitamin D, which is the main blood test for vitamin D status. So gear up tight because I'm going to break all of these things down. So we'll start with CBC. So a CBC is a complete blood count. This test checks the main parts of your blood: red blood cells, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and white blood cells and platelets. This helps flag patterns like anemia, inflammation, or infection signals, and general oxygen carrying capacity. Then we have the CMP. CMP stands for Comprehensive Metabolic Panel. It checks a group of markers tied to electrolytes and organ function, mainly kidney and liver. This is a broad snapshot that can give context on hydration chemistry, blood sugar, and how the body is handling metabolic load. Next, we would go looking through your iron studies, which is a small group of tests that usually include ferritin, serum iron, transferritin or TIBC, and percent saturation. That helps show whether iron is low, whether stores are low, or whether iron is present but not being used well. Next, we have a test for B12, which is the vitamin B12 blood level. B12 supports nerve function and red blood cell health. Low B12 can be associated with fatigue, numbness or tingling, and cognitive fog. Some people can have symptoms even when the basic number looks borderline, which is why extra markers are sometimes used. And me, myself, I had low B12 and I was experiencing all of these things. And had I not checked my blood panel and seen what was going on, basic panel, or whichever you want to say, my CBC, my CMP, I would have never known, and I would have been taking all of the wrong supplementation. So I say this not only just to be a know-it-all, but to say that I've been through things and I'm here to help. The next test would, excuse me, the next test would be for vitamin B9 blood level, which is folate. If people have the MTHFR gene that expresses itself, and you can have some issues, digesting like folic acid or folate, this is definitely something that you want to look into. It. I have already did an episode on that, so you can go back to, I believe, episode 7. If guys, that is the wrong episode, please correct me, and you can hear more about that. Moving forward, folate supports red blood cell production and methylation pathways, meaning the chemistry involved in DNA repair and neurotransmitter balance. As you know, this is about DNA, so we're all on top of that. If you have low folate, it can overlap with anemia patterns and energy issues. And you can already see by listening to some of the definitions of these panels and these tests where there could be some supplements that blur the lines, or you can make some mistakes, or you can cause more interference by not truly know what's going on in your body. I'm pretty sure that didn't make any sense whatsoever. So basically, you might be raising the volume too much by taking some of these supplements. But let me not go on too much of a tangent and continue. 25 hydroxy vitamin D, right? That's the test you want to go for. It's also it's usually written as 25 OHD. This is the main blood test used to assess vitamin D status. It reflects overall vitamin D availability better than the active form for routine screening or screening. Nobody's screaming. There are also labs that may be added depending on the situation, and I encourage you to go check them out 100%. Spend a little extra money, because then you have a full overview of your body. And these tests are going to be the methylmalonic acid test, the homeocysteine test, the vitamin A test, the vitamin E test, and the vitamin K1 test. Okay? Or did I say test or text? If I did say text, it's test. So those are super important. Now that you have a breakdown of those tests, let's move forward. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs all these tests. I'm encouraging you to get them, because with more data, we're able to make more informed choices, and we're able to get ourselves healthy. I'm saying the standard is you test first when the goal is correcting a suspected deficiency. Once you have that baseline, everything else gets so much cleaner. You're going to stop taking supplements like shots in the dark. You're going to start matching your tools to your reality. I know I use like. I'm trying not to use like and filler words, so bear with me. After that point is established, this is where food is usually the first move. So not as a moral thing and not as a rule that applies to everyone, but because food brings the nutrient plus the supporting context around it. Meals come with protein, fiber, water content, and natural ratios that most bodies handle better. That's, of course, if you're not doing chips and all that. Other junk food, you can have that once in a while, but try not to make it a habit. So supplements still have a role when the gap is a real thing. When certain foods aren't an option, though, for instance, allergies or some type of rejection your body is going through, when your digestion is compromised, or when someone is working with a clinician on something specific, supplementation does come in handy. And that being said, before we move any further, let's get into medical history. For most of human history, healing happened in the same rooms where people lived. There weren't lab reports, there weren't pharmacies, there wasn't a clean separation between medicine, religion, and community rules. There were midwives helping births, herbalists mixing plants for pain and sleep, and local healers doing the best they could with what they could observe. When something worked and nobody understood why, it could look miraculous. When something went wrong and nobody understood why, it could look like something sinister was involved. That's what happens when mechanisms are unknown. The outcome becomes the story. In early modern Europe, that fear sometimes got formalized. Witch trials weren't just superstition floating around. In some places, it became law. Courtrooms, accusations, interrogations, punishment. The harshest version is the one most people remember, burning at the stake in parts of continental Europe. In England, executions for witchcraft were typically done by hanging. In Scotland, historical accounts often describe strangling and then burning the body afterward. The details change by region, but the pattern stayed the same. When fear is high, the person closest to the unknown can become the target. And it wasn't only folk healers. Medicine was also becoming more professionalized, meaning more tied to institutions, licensing, and social authority. As certain methods became approved, other methods could become suspect, especially if the results looked unusual or threatened the accepted story of what was allowed to heal. That's part of the reason this supplement conversation even exists. People still live inside the same human reaction. If something works and they don't understand why, it becomes a miracle product. If something fails and they don't understand why, the whole topic gets dismissed. The calmer middle ground is learning enough about your body that the results stop feeling so random. And that's the lane we're staying in when we talk about synergy and antagonism. So this is why I love the science, because now we can finish the rest of the podcast knowing this is where we've come from. Synergy usually shows up in a few simple ways. Sometimes one thing helps another get absorbed, so more of it actually makes it through. Sometimes one thing helps the body use the other, so the same dose feels more effective. Sometimes one thing reduces a blocker, so the other finally does what you thought it would do. Now, antagonism is often about timing. Two things compete in the same window. Or you change too many things at once and you create noise instead of feedback. Me personally, I tried alpha GPC, uridine, please guys correct me if I'm wrong, and L-phenylalanine. And my ears started ringing. And this was a process that I have experimented on myself, and being that I had ADHD, boy, was that terrifying, but it made me go searching for the real answers. Now, with a little bit more research prior to, anyone could have figured that that would have been the outcome. But because that was the outcome, I said, if I'm experiencing this as I'm researching genetics and moving into technology, what other interference are people experiencing? So back to antagonism. I know I go on these tangents, but again, antagonism is often about timing. Now, we can talk about real pairings in a way that actually makes sense now that you understand antagonism fully and synergism fully. Let's start with iron and vitamin C in a clean synergy example. A lot of iron from plant foods is harder for the body to absorb. Vitamin C helps the body pull more of that iron in. So when someone is leaning on lentils, beans, spinach, or fortified grains, pairing that meal with vitamin C can make the same food work harder. So this can look like lentils with lemons and peppers, beans with tomatoes or salsa, spinach paired with citrus or berries. If someone is using an iron supplement, the logic doesn't really change. Vitamin C with iron is often a helpful move. And if you're thinking like I'm thinking, what about antagonism? Like the next question obviously becomes what tends to get in the way. I don't say obviously in a condescending way, but more of like a science kind of Sherlock Holmes way. There's that like again, if anybody heard it, please call me out. No filler words. We're trying to improve our language models. So let's use calcium as an example. Calcium itself isn't a problem. The overlap is the problem because iron and calcium can compete when they hit the system in that same window. So if breakfast is heavy in dairy, lunch or dinner becomes the better place for iron-focused meal. If calcium and iron are both in the supplement routine, they don't go down together. Separating those two windows is usually the smartest cleanup move. Once you see that pattern, the next one is easier to spot. Some vitamins behave differently than others because of how they're absorbed. Vitamin A, D, E, and K are fat soluble, and you can look at it like they have their own personality. When there's fat in the meal, they tend to be absorbed better. So taking them with a real meal usually feels smoother than taking them on an empty stomach. Greens with olive oil is a simple one. Eggs with avocado is another. Salmon with vegetables work well when the meal actually includes fat, not a dry plate, and hoping that everything goes well. I will most definitely share foods that are rich in all of these vitamins. I do it on a day-to-day basis with my clients. And yes, they're always asking, and I have printouts if you do need them. Comment nutrition inside of the podcast on any platform that you're on, and I will send you a link to all of these vitamins. I mean, foods that have these vitamins, that are rich in these vitamins. I just realized I said that. Let's keep going. So zinc and copper is the kind of issue that shows up quietly, and usually only when zinc becomes a long habit, which is you're dosing at outrageous levels. Food rarely creates the problem on its own. The pattern is more like someone takes zinc for immunity or recovery, keeps it in the routine for months, and then copper status or your copper levels typically start to drift down because zinc can interfere with copper over time. Short-term zinc, though, for a specific reason, is different than high dosing of zinc over a long period of time, or as a default. And that's when you have to plan to make sure you are getting appropriate levels. Okay, so St. John's wort is a different category. I might have butchered that name, as I butcher a lot of things, because it can change how quickly the body clears many medications. If someone is on prescriptions, adding it casually can create confusion because medication can feel weaker even though nothing about the prescription has changed. So just make sure you speak to your pharmacist and your doctor before adding something like St. John's wort. Now, let's pull all of this into a protocol that you can actually use without turning your life into a ginormous spreadsheet. We're going to start with one target. First, what's the reason you're supplementing? If the reason is correcting a suspected low level, blood work comes first, so the target is real and attainable. 2, you're going to run food for a couple of weeks where it's possible, because it gives you a baseline that's easier to interpret. 3, if supplements are needed, add 1 at a time, not 3 at once. Split your supplements into at least 2 time windows if your stack is more than a couple items, because most antagonism happens when everything gets forced into one moment. So what that looks like would be 1 in the morning with food, where you put the stuff that tends to sit well with a meal, like a multivitamin, omega-3, vitamin D if you use it, creatine if you're on that. Then the second window later, usually with dinner or closer to bed, where you put things like magnesium or anything you take for relaxation. For instance, if you take zinc, it often goes smoother away from a big mineral pile as well. Just splitting the day like that already makes your stack feel less cluttered. Iron is a good example of why timing makes such a difference as well, because iron and calcium are classic competitors, as we spoke about. So if your breakfast is dairy heavy, yogurt, milk, protein shake with milk, cereal with milk, that's not the moment to take iron. Again, it's not that dairy is the enemy, it's just not the best pairing within the same hour. Iron tends to go better later, and it goes even better when vitamin C shows up in the same meal. So iron at lunch with something like peppers, tomatoes, citrus berries, that's a clean lane. Calcium can stay with breakfast or dinner, iron gets its own window. This way, there's no collision. Once the timing is cleaner, the next thing that makes everything easier is having one signal you're watching, because most people change 3 supplements and then try to feel it out. And the body doesn't give clean feedback when you're changing everything at once. So another protocol would be to pick one thing to track for 2 weeks, just one. If your energy is the problem, check in with yourself around 2 p.m. every day. No fancy journal, just ask, am I steady? Or am I crashing and reaching for caffeine or sugar? If sleep is the problem, pay attention to how long it takes you to fall asleep once you actually put your phone down. That's your signal. If digestion is the problem, notice if you're more bloated, more constipated, or more irritated after you've introduced something new. If training recovery is a problem, notice how your body feels the next morning. Are you waking up stiff and cooked, or do you feel like you can go again? Remember, one signal is enough because it gives you a readable pattern. Then, when you adjust timing or remove one collision like iron and calcium, you can actually see whether it helped instead of arguing with yourself about your vibe. Guys, if you're interested in some common common stacks that go well together, please DM me stacks on my Instagram from my number 8 podcast, or leave a comment below saying stacks. I will then text you back, send you an email, and make sure you get started on the right foot. I just can't speak today, guys. Can't speak today. Not at all. So that brings me to the end of the podcast. And next episode, we're going back into genetics with FTO. I really hope that you have a better understanding of antagonism and synergy. If you don't, please, for those who have my personal number, give me a call. For those who don't, send me an email, drop some comments below, and I will get back to you as quickly as possible. Thank you for listening. And guys, remember, your biology listens. Live like it.